Hello beautiful friends, I'm here today with another new project to share with you for the Cut to You design team. Today I am featuring this Heart of Flowers cut file to document the story of my husband's marriage proposal to me, which happened back in 2018. As I've mentioned in a previous video, May is a big anniversary month for us. It's the anniversary of when we first met. It's also the anniversary of when he proposed, and it's the month of our wedding anniversary. So my plan for this month is to spend some time documenting some currently unscrapped wedding photos, but I also realized that I have had this project sitting in my crafty space for quite some time, waiting to complete this layout, and today is the day that I'm doing it. So as you can see, I've already backed that cut file with some patterned paper and also some vellum. And I have these large chipboard alphas, which were from an old Ali Edwards kit. And I also have some chipboard thickers in a scripted font, but I wasn't happy with the white. So I'm just applying some Liquitex gold paint to them. I've cut most of that process out because it was quite tedious. I had to add a couple of layers of paint. And my only tip for you, if you are planning on painting some thickers yourself, because it's a fantastic way of altering those to make them suit whatever project you're working on. If they are one of the thickers with more of a glossy or a shiny surface, you'll probably want to give them a light sanding first to help the paint adhere. I found that I had problems with the paint sort of disappearing on the glossy background, if that makes sense. So I did have to apply a few different coats of that. Now, while I've been chatting away, I've left this process in. I don't usually show it because I know I've included it in lots of previous videos, but it's been quite a while since I have shown this process, and I thought for any new viewers, it might be helpful to see how I create my page mats, my page borders. So I've taken my background cardstock and matted it onto a darker pink, and I've gutted out the middle, used my trimmer to cut out the middle, and then use some wet adhesive to just tack it down, and then run it through my sewing machine with some white thread. Now, because I wanted the 12 by 12 layout to purely just be documenting those photos, I've got 4 photos that I'm using. I knew that there was going to be a lot of journaling, because obviously it's quite a long story, the story of his proposal. There was quite a lot that I wanted to include. So as I have done in the past, I will be creating a separate 6 by 12 insert, which will sit alongside this 12 by 12 page in an album, whenever it makes it into an album, and the 2 pages will go together. So off camera, I've typed out my journaling. I have added that to a pink gingham pattern paper, and then I've just added a little bit of mixed media, using a stencil to the top and the bottom of that page. And then on my 12 by 12 layout here, I knew that I wanted to add this. This is the Prima soft texture paste that I'm using, and I absolutely adore this medium. I knew that I wanted to add a little bit of mixed media to peek out from behind the cut file, but because I've backed the whole thing onto vellum, I didn't want my mixed media to come inside the cut file, if that makes sense. So I wanted it to be restricted to just fall outside the cut file, because anything inside will show through the vellum, and I wanted what was behind the vellum to be clear. So I kept the inside piece, what you can see there, the white, and I've just tacked that down onto my page using a tiny little bit of adhesive, and I'm using that as a mask while I'm adding my texture paste through this stencil, and it worked super well. It meant that, yeah, when I do lay that cut file down, all of my mixed media is around the outside, the border of that cut file, which is exactly what I wanted. So I'm just going through, and I think I bring the cut file in a couple of times just to make sure that I've applied enough, that I'm happy with the placement. And then to finish it off, I wanted to add some gold splatters. So because I had used way too much of that Liquitex acrylic paint, the gold paint, I'm just adding that into one of the little palettes there and adding some water to it so that it's a little bit more liquid. And then I'm just going to use my paintbrush to tap that around the page. And then again, for cohesiveness, I'm doing the same here on this journaling page, but I'm covering up my journaling as I'm splattering that gold paint on, because I don't want it to end up on my journaling side. Okay, so now my alphas are all dry, the paint's all dry on them, so I'm ready to start adhering those down. I already knew that I would be layering this word yes with the exclamation mark over the top of the vellum of this cut file. So I think first of all I'm just going to lay them down just so that I know that I've got the placement right, that I've got them evenly spaced. And something a little bit different for me, I am intentionally making them not straight. I am somebody who really likes things to be in straight lines and lined up really well, but this time I am not. I'm intentionally offsetting the letters so that they don't fall in a straight line, and I like it. It's nice. I'm happy that I pushed myself out of my comfort zone to try something a little bit different. And it also removes the need to get something super straight, that need for perfection. So I'm just using a little bit of wet adhesive behind those. I tried not to add too much because I know that it can cause vellum to warp. So I've just used the smallest amount, just enough to adhere them down. And now I'm having a look at how I want my photos to be placed. So as I mentioned, I have got 4 photos here. They are slightly smaller than 3x4, and I have already matted them onto some plain white cardstock to give them a nice border. And my initial plan is to do 2 of them on one side of the heart and then have 2 of them sit on the other side of the heart. But what you'll see a little bit later on is I changed that slightly. But for now, I'm just adhering the 2 photos together. I'm making sure that I'm happy with the placement, with how they're sitting, and just using just one line of adhesive tape. Now this is another cut to cut file that I'm using. I'm bringing in, again, it's to add cohesiveness. The florals, the design of the florals in this is the spring edge cut file. The design of the floral is the same as the florals, or very similar to the florals that are used in that Heart of Flowers cut file. And I have duplicated it. I've cut it out twice, one slightly smaller than the other. And I'm going to pop one of them at the top of my journaling here, and then the other one will go and sit down the bottom of the page. Now I am making sure that I'm using a fair bit of wet adhesive because it is sitting over the top of that texture paste. So I need to make sure that there's enough adhesive there for it to fall in between the gaps of the texture paste and adhere solidly to the background cardstock. And as you saw, I'm using my very high-tech paperweight to weigh that down while it dries off, and pop that aside so that it's got some time to dry. And now I'm going to stick this cut file down. Now when I'm adding my adhesive to the floral edges of the cut file, I'm leaving the outside of the florals and the leaves free, so I'm not adding any adhesive to those, which means that they're not sitting flat against the page. I don't put any adhesive foam behind them, but it's just enough to give it just a little bit of dimension and to give it just a little bit of movement. Back over to my journaling page, and I'm ready to start adhering down the title. So it says, "He asked, I said," and there was a little bit of excess paint around each of the letters. So before I stick them down, I'm just using my little pokey tool to get rid of that. And then these stickers are really pretty old, so there's not a lot of adhesive left on them. So I'm using my wet glue as I stick this down. And then with the magic of video editing, there we are, and I'm ready to stick down my last letter up the top there. That's pretty much it for this page because it is a home for the journaling. So I'm going to pop that aside, and I will come back to it with just a few finishing touches towards the end of this video. But for now, I am working on adhering these photos down. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, my plan was originally to have the photos split, so 2 on one side and 2 on the other side, and that's certainly where I'm at the moment. But I wanted to add just a little something to the outside edges of each of these photos, just a little bit of extra interest. Otherwise, my layout was going to be quite plain, I think. So I've grabbed some journaling cards, and I don't think I've mentioned that I'm using a Felicity Jane kit for this. I'm not sure if it's Grace or Hope. It's Hope. There we go. It's Hope. So I'm using the Felicity Jane Hope collection. I grabbed some journaling cards, and I've just trimmed some strips from those, which I'm planning on using. And now I'm just having a look through the embellishment pack to see what embellishments I can use that suit the theme of this particular layout. And obviously you can see some cactuses there. That's not really at all relevant to what I'm scrapbooking, but certainly the florals. There are some hearts, that die cut piece that says good moments. There is a circle that says heart this. Those things are very, very much relevant to this page. I also, later on, I knew that I wanted to add some little word phrase strips, so I bring in some of those, and you'll see that a little bit later on in the video as I get towards the end. So for now, I'm just thinking about how I want these little patterned paper strips, which I've cut from my journal cards, to sit around the page. I toyed with the idea of popping them at the bottom of each of the photos, but in the end, I stick with just the two sides, and I only use the two pinks. I don't bring in more of that. It's kind of like a muted sage. That's the color, like a sage green. So for now I'm just sticking with these two pieces and lining them up on the outside edge of those two photos. And now I'm going to add some foam tape behind these sets of photos. The foam tape that I use, if you are new and you haven't heard me speaking about it before, I purchased it. It's a huge roll. I'm probably about halfway through the roll now, and I've had it for at least a year. It's a huge roll that I purchased from Bunnings, which is a local hardware store. It's photo mounting tape. And the one that I purchased is actually photo safe, so it's acid free, which makes me much happier about using it on my scrapbook pages. So as you can see, I decided against having the two sets of photos separated, and I've just brought them together. I added a little bit of wet adhesive on the tops of the photos and then applied a little bit more foam tape on the join at the back just to help keep them in place. And now I'm going to tear off that backing. The only criticism that I have of this tape is that the backing can be really quite tricky to pull off. In bigger pieces, it's a little bit easier than it is in smaller pieces. And now I am getting on to doing some embellishing. So this is the part that I hadn't really planned out too well. So it's a little bit slap happy, just chuck it on there and see how it looks and make it work. And if I'd put some more thought into it, I probably would have varied the placement a little bit more, but it's ended up the way that it is, and it's just fine. So I don't do my usual 2 clusters nestled around the photo or 3 clusters to create a visual triangle. I definitely break all the rules with my embellishment clusters on this layout. I have one little cluster that I'm building at the top left of the photos, one to the top right, and then 2 more at the bottom. So it's slightly awkward, but I think it still works well enough. I also went through, I have a large box of just random Felicity Jane supplies. Some of them are bits and pieces that I've picked up in sales. Others are the leftovers of kits that I've already worked with. And I just went digging through that to find a few more bits and pieces that would tie in, because I wanted to just add a little bit more to the embellishing. And as I mentioned, I wanted to bring some word phrase strips in, so I found these Ali Edwards word phrase strips, and I just picked a couple of things that again are relevant to the story that I'm telling. And then to finish off, no Nouveau drops, but I am using these really sweet enamel hearts from Felicity Jane. I have a couple of packs of these, and it's definitely a product that I have hoarded, but I brought them out and I'm just scattering some of the pink, and I think I might use 1 or 2 white enamel hearts on my main page, and then also over on my journaling page. And that will be it to finish off this layout. Of course, I do have some close-up photos coming in just a moment. If you head down to my description box below, you'll find all the links for the cut files that I've used, and links to everything that you need for the Cut to You store. So I will leave it there and say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.